We're live with what I would consider closest you could find to a GamerGate expert. So let's start off with who are you?
Hey, I'm Tachyon Blue, also known as Kevin McDonald. I'm currently working on a multimedia project relating to GamerGate. I've interviewed over 70 people on both sides of the controversy, mostly on the pro GamerGate side. But I do have some anti-GamerGate people who I'm appreciative that they've agreed to participate in the project, and I'm glad to have their voices too. It's going to be published as multiple volumes as a book, but also as I'm transcribing the interviews. Um, oh, sorry, I had a little bit of feedback
Oh,
coming in. But anyway, I'm making clips as I go. Um,
good
so
plan. Good plan.
releasing those publicly, and yeah, and I'm on open book, so hit me up.
Okay. Well, I also got my casual gaming friend who I took through basically the history of gaming, Gray Poupe. What is your
Hey,
perception? What was your perception as a casual? I mean, I wasn't even following this Gamergate stuff, but I worked at GameStop for a bit, so I started ignoring what people said about games. That was me. What about your experience that you think
uh,
you want to know going into this?
yeah. Well, I definitely came in like way after the fact, and I had just kind of heard the normie take that it was just a bunch of people mad at game journalists, essentially. I realized that I had like just a fraction of what the actual picture of the thing is. So yeah, I'm definitely way more casual, as Vincent is kind of saying. But yeah, I guess since you are the overall expert, essentially, you've interviewed more people on this subject than anyone else. Where do you fall on it? Do you think it was overblown on both sides, or do you think it was legit? I'm assuming.
I guess it depends, like what you mean by legit. I should disclose I was involved with GamerGate at the time too, so I didn't come at this completely neutral, though I tried to be as fair as I could. But I
Sure.
it depends on what you mean by like over like what do you mean by legit? Like were there legitimate ethical issues that were raised? Like yes.
Yeah. Do you think that there were legitimate issues that people were bringing up, or was it essentially just misogyny and people were upset that they weren't allowed to kind of run roughshod over their kingdom? Is I think what the initial claims were.
So I would say that I'd say that there were a lot of legitimate ethical issues. Now there also were people on both sides who were culture warriors, like who wanted to fight a culture war. I don't think that that was the majority from my research, but also to a lot of this GamerGate controversy blew up and like took on other forms. So like obviously it started with ethics and like that was a huge push for a lot of people. But as more and more controversies happened and got like layered on to the GamerGate controversy, people were taking positions on various other issues too, like relating to censorship and artistic freedom and all these other different like areas and like representation in games. And like people were so now instead of like just having a conversation just about ethics, you're forced to have a conversation for better or worse, right? And let people want to have these discussions about a huge array of ancillary topics too. I'm sure you're seeing this today in the gaming sphere as well.
Oh,
Yep,
for sure.
the effects are still felt throughout it. So let's take off journalist mode here. Let's get into some. Let me actually start with the first one. Uh, so basically, how far back does the do you plan? Let's actually start with the other one. What was the reaction to your first book, and why are you writing this second book now?
Okay, so yeah, I did write a book in 2019, Gamergate First Battle of the Culture War. Um, the reaction, I guess, was like mostly positive from like my community, from like the people who were pro Gamergate. The reviews, there weren't a huge amount of reviews on Amazon, but there were some. Some people pointed out that it's a biased work or that it requires additional. It requires you to understand, like already have some level of understanding about the topic before you can really jump in and understand it. So I think there's a lot of areas where I didn't flesh things out as much as I should have, and like that's part of why I'm doing this second book too.
Okay. Yeah. I could go with the boring question of how are you going to make this second book much better, but let's just skip that. I'm sure what you're doing, I'm following along partially as much as I can. So, how when do you consider the beginning of Gamergate? I saw your sort of interview with the Hat Man, I believe. His theory is interesting. The Dick Wolf situation. It's sort of funny. Dick with the SVU, isn't that guy named like Dick Wolf
Wolf as
himself.
well. Yeah.
I just find that a little bit ironic, Dick Wolf to associations there. But yeah, when do you consider this real start of Gamergate, or at least when are you gonna start it in your book officially?
Okay. So the books are just the interviews themselves. I'm not really gonna have a huge amount of. I guess I'll have some commentary, like a chapter before, probably a chapter at the end, and so I might talk about that, like the start of GamerGate, of course. But I'd say August 2014. I usually put it around like during GamerGate. I'd usually put it around like the Gamers Are Dead articles, like those specific articles coming out, and the backlash to those. That's what I did when I was an activist at the time. When I talk to people now, people have so many different definitions. I'm just gonna use August 2014 as a general matter, as a catch-all, the whole month, I guess, of events. Historically speaking, I think that's where I'm going to start it. Now, you've seen Hatman's theory. It I wouldn't. I'm not sure to call it like a theory. Or well, I mean, it is right to some extent, but
Yeah,
do you-
proto Gamergate. Okay, what led up to
yeah,
Gamergate? I do find that sort of because Gamergate just didn't happen. Zoe Quinn didn't just magically sleep with Five Guys franchise source and out of magic, and that's the start of Gamergate. But yeah, there was probably shit that led up to Gamergate, which is always good to know. But I guess you're just focusing on the events which you consider Gamergate, which is
yeah.
good.
Though Hatman's follow up, I did when I did a book follow up with him. Like I saw you saw part of at least. Um, that's going to be in the book as well. So that will be included. Probably toward like I don't know if I'm going to do it right after his or if, later on. I don't know. We'll see. But that's going to be in the book as well. And I did think it was worth exploring too because it is interesting to find out like where all this how this blew up into this massive thing. And it's important to note too that his research in this area, the precursor to Gamergate, quote unquote, the prehistory he calls it, like that's more focused on like his investigation into like this like clique, quote unquote, of people, like the social justice clique in gaming, but like the illiberal social justice clique in gaming, like very specific
Yeah.
individuals who were openly pro censorship, and like how they, in his view, influenced the gaming industry and games journalism. But like that is like one area to explore, but there's like other different people came into it with different ideas.
Yeah. Now the really tough question, something that sort of came up. Do you blame Ben Yahtzee for sort of first being mentioning about the gamer label, or do you blame him more for the glorious master race PC race meme there, or do they like cancel each other out or amplify each other?
What the PC Master Race meme?
Yes, I just wanted to throw in a little bit of a stupid
Well, look,
question before we
Yahtzee.
get into it.
Sure, we want to talk about Yahtzee. So I don't know a
Yep.
huge amount about Yahtzee's content. Um, Apparently, according to Hatman, he did hold the view that the gamer identity should probably go away. He didn't say anything during the Gamers Are Dead articles, to my recollection.
Yes, that's
But he did
correct. From
express
what
this
I've
view.
researched.
And look, that's his opinion. He's entitled to it. If he thinks that that's what if he doesn't want to call himself a gamer on a personal level anymore, that's totally his choice. He doesn't have to. And if I don't, he shouldn't try to like push it on other people. And I don't think he is really. I think he just expressed
Yeah,
a viewpoint
sorry.
on
I
it.
had to throw that one meme one in there because of what you said in the Glorious Master Race thing that he started. Wonderful meme, by the way. Great. You want to jump in here with a few questions? I'm way too lost in the sauce, so I don't
Yeah.
know where someone outside would want to investigate this. Another reason to bring you in.
Sure. I guess so. I've heard a bunch of different kind of definitions for Gamergate. As kind of the foremost expert, if you were to give like your most kind of concise like elevator pitch or like thumbnail sketch of it, how would you describe Gamergate?
I would say that Gamergate was, I guess, essentially about ethics in journalism, particularly in games journalism, because there was a controversy, and well, there were a number of controversies, but there was one controversy that led to multiple other controversies being uncovered around the same time period. But some people in the games press didn't want to talk about these controversies, and even colluded in some cases to try to make sure that this story was killed, and that blew it up even bigger, and so did attempts to demonize people who wanted to talk about it as being misogynistic or supporting harassment. And which is not to say that nobody ever got harassed, of course, um, but they used this as to basically to silence all dissent, rather than have a
The
conversation about the
harassment
ethical
shield.
issues.
Yeah, not your shield. Should have been efficient, but do you know about that grade? I'm not your shield. A whole bunch of gamer gators came to a front and basically minorities and women defended the GamerGaters.
Yeah,
And
I do remember that. It
And Tachyon Blue
is
would
kind of-
probably know
Yeah, so-
more about
sorry
that.
about my
It was a GamerGate thing, but also at the same time, I believe that some of the people who used the Not Your Shield hashtag weren't involved with GamerGate. Because it was sort of like a separate thing that was simultaneously happening, but it was like basically overlap was near a circle, you know. But yeah, I think it was cool. I know some people are like, well, aren't you using identity politics? And it's like, well, I don't have a problem with this. Like, if these people feel like, if you're a minority or if you're a woman or you're, you know, LGBT or whatever it happens to be, and you're disabled, some people did. If you're that and you feel like you're being used as a shield to deflect criticism away by games journalists or others, then I think that it's perfectly legitimate for you to make your voice heard. And at least one person who I talked to and I interviewed with actually said that they became a supporter of Gamergate because they saw this. They went in skeptical. They said a man in maroon. My interview with him, he says he went in kind of skeptical, thought, okay, I don't know much about it, but you know, I heard it's about harassment, so I'm gonna look into it myself. And he said he saw the Not Your Shield stuff, and he's like, you know what, something must be wrong here. If this many women and minorities are saying that this is not true, and that there's being basically used as a shield, I guess, essentially, right, by the games press, that he's like, there must be something more going on here. He started looking into it a lot more. Changed his mind.
That's awesome. That's awesome that he, you know, was willing to actually change it. It seems like so often now people kind of go in with the predetermined outcome and they're just unwilling to see other things. So that's really
man,
cool.
Steven Crowder destroyed that idea. Fucking Steven Crowder. Sorry about that. But yeah, there's a whole. But go on,
think
Greg.
that it has Gamergate was successful in kind of bringing to light these ethical issues in games journalism, and do you think it's been successful, or is the problem still there?
Okay, it's a complicated question. I, as like a historical person, I guess historian, when I look at it, what I try to do is I try to look at what the people in the movement think, and I think that from what I've interviewed, I haven't collated like all the data yet into pie charts and shit. But from what I've talked to, most of the people think it was successful, and most of the people thought it was successful in Brad Glasgow and Chris Ferguson's survey in December 2015 to January 2016 too. So I think most people, by whatever definition they personally use, they thought it was successful. Now, as for if it was successful in regards to games journalism, specifically exposing these things, I think so, yeah. Because like, say what you will about the GamerGate people, they're not very quiet. we
That's true.
love to talk about this stuff, and a lot of us, not everybody, but you know, most people, I think, or most people who talk about this on a regular basis today, at least, try to like stick to the facts and be very careful how they. Maybe not, but like the people who like are the historian type people. There's other people too, other experts, not just me, and some of them disagree with me on stuff. But if it was successful, I think so. Right? We cataloged games journalism ethical problems with like deep freeze. We created entire wikis about this stuff, like the GamerGate wiki. There were two different ones. There's tons of videos online. You'll find tons of articles too, blogs, of just people in forum posts all over the internet, talking about the various ethical issues. I think we did a good job putting a spotlight on it. And some of these websites did initiate reforms, and some like new websites were created too, with like varying degrees of success. So I think that, like, yes, I think it was successful in that way.
A lot of the. I'm so sorry for speaking over you. I think I'm slightly delayed. I was going to say it does seem like some of the titans at the time, they don't seem to have their same, I don't know, position, if you will. Like it does seem like it's definitely. I don't know if games journalism seems like it's nearly the monolith that it was at that time. I could be a little bit wrong on that. I am still a bit casual, but I don't see people really regarding the reviews as quite the same as they were back in the day.
Yeah, if you're looking at the news, a lot of these sites are getting sort of eaten up nowadays. Okay, under
they just had
big
IGN.
umbrella.
IGN just purchased the Gamer Network, VG20.7, Rock Paper Shotgun, a bunch of other sites.
Do you think that is a result of this? Did it just kind of take some of that credibility away because of the ethical issues?
To some extent, maybe. And like, if you look at like the Alexander Macris, Archon, the founder of the Escapists, I interviewed him recently, And he's got this whole chart he shows over like the Alexa rankings for the websites. It's like his website, Kotaku, Polygon, and like one other one. I think it was Kotaku at least was on there. And it just shows that a lot of these sites did lose traffic after the Gamers Are Dead articles. Now Polygon didn't do a Gamers Are Dead article, to be clear, but he was tracking their stats too. And it shows that like the Escapists actually did better than these other sites during that period. Now, of course, these sites lasted several years. I don't know how much that impacted them directly, or how much these ethical concerns impacted them directly. I think it had some impact, both in terms of like the advertiser loss for sure, and then also I think their reputations were harmed. But also, this is games journalism, so a lot of people, the industry is not like booming right now. The games journalism industry at least isn't
Yeah.
booming right now. So there's a lot of competition with podcasts, with YouTube, with streaming. So people are like, well, do I go to Kotaku and get the review, or do I want to just watch my favorite streamer or YouTuber play it, or have them do like a deep dive and see what they say?
I mean, even all
For
this
sure.
stuff seemed to have been brought up during GamerGate. I went over some of Total Biscuit going on Hatman's stream, and even he was talking about how these people need to do better. Okay, the research and all this other rigmarole with that. Talking about that, let's get into a little bit more dirt. Let's see how you think about what it propped up some careers out there. Sargon's quite big, and I think he really found his footing in Gamergate. Any strong opinions of anything around Sargon or factual stuff? Like, how big of an influence was he on Gamergate and what he sort of did optics wise? You probably,
Okay.
yeah,
So
Sargon.
I knew Sargon back in the day. I haven't really interacted with him since. But okay, so I have like a relatively low opinion of him. So okay, let's just go
Well,
through it.
he is
So
going to liberal, so
well, yeah, he's no longer a liberal at all.
yeah.
But so with Sargon, he was involved very early on too. He was one of the first YouTubers to talk about it. He did have a channel before then. He was also a game developer before them, right? He was supposedly working on this game called Necromancer. Or yeah, Necromancer, yes. And he crowdfunded for this before Gamergate. So he was already supposedly working on this game, and he would do updates on his show, on his channel. He would post updates of the gameplay footage and stuff, but it was way delayed. And eventually, um, he ended up canceling the game. And he says he tried to refund as many. He says he tried to refund people if they asked him for one, and but the game never
Not
came out.
very ethical.
This was
Uh,
obviously a controversy. But at the time, so there was like it was a slow build, right? Because like he was confronted on this by Verilo and Seattle for Truth, actually, and like a couple other people too. Like a bunch of people were talking about it, and he had them on his stream. Maybe not the best people to bring on, but um, anyway, he gave answers like, "Oh well, look, I had this issue with the artwork, and then blah 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 blah." And he's like, "Well, look, I'm going to have it come out still. I'm still working on it. Just I'm way behind, right?" So a lot of people gave him, including myself, gave him the benefit of the doubt. And we're like, okay, well, maybe he is going to finish this project. We should just, if he says there's delays, but he's going to try and work on those. But then, of course, he later ended up not doing it at all. As for his politics at the time, I'd say he was more like a milk toast center left ish person. Um, like it depends like what you mean by like center left, I guess. But he was like pro universal healthcare, pro immigration, stuff like that. And he's in the UK, so universal healthcare is like not really a controversial topic there too much. Um, and he was involved with gamer cases. He made videos about it. He also talked about. So originally he talked about the Digra stuff. So he originally he made tons of videos on this, right? Because he wanted to. It was a big topic. Get a lot of views if you talk about it. Plus, maybe he was a true believer. I don't know. But he would make videos about like the various different aspects of it, including he talked about like Digra at one point, and like, well, is there a problem with this like social justice clique of people? And he was like asking questions about that, but then he's like, well, no, I don't think we should go that route. I don't think that that's really true. I've looked at some of their other work, he says, and it's not that bad. Like some of these people are legitimate scholars, and we should give them the benefit of the doubt. And he said that Gamergate, he wanted to take Gamergate in an ethics only direction, um, which was because like it should be noted in 2014, 2015, and like 2016, like people like fought over like to what GamerGate should be about to some extent.
Mm. Yeah.
And so like there were internal divisions of people wanting to go a whole bunch of different directions with it. But he originally like flirted with the idea of, well, like, should we talk about the social justice warrior stuff in gaming? And he still did, but he considered that separate from his GamerGate work later on.
Yeah.
And then he also wanted to he got after Airplay, there was a cohort of people who wanted to
Airplay is the documentary, just to be clear to anyone watching.
Airplay the
Okay.
event was a event in 2015.
Okay.
Hosted by the
I
SPJ.
just wanted to clarify. It was an actual event 2014, you're saying? Okay.
2015. It was August 2015.
Okay.
And so the documentary is based on that event.
Okay.
But after Airplay, there were people who wanted GamerGate to end, and Sargon eventually made a video, basically declaring GamerGate over, because it's like the victory of GamerGate, I think he called it, or something, as he wanted to move on and cover other topics, like move into politics and stuff like that. So he tried to declare it over, and in like 2015, 2016 maybe. But a lot of people disagreed with him on that, including myself at the time.
Yeah, wow, that is a good question. But
then over time,
so where would you put the end of it then? If he's declaring it in 2016, and you're saying that even you would disagree with that? Do you think it's over, or is it ever going?
Well, it depends on who you ask. I think the vast majority of people consider it over, basically. I think 2018, roughly, because I remember being in like late 2017, things were really starting to slow down. There just wasn't as much stuff happening, and there weren't as many people interested in it. And then by 2018, that's when like the last of the publicly advertised, I should say, at least, meetups occurred. So you had like the GG in San Francisco meetup, 2 of those, I believe, and then you also had my meetups in St. Louis. I had 1 or 2 of those too, and then there was the debate in St. Louis that was live streamed as well. But like other than that, there wasn't too much like stuff happening. So I feel like 2018, like early to mid 2018, is like when it pretty much died down, like summer. I think we could look it up, but the last San Francisco meetup, I think it might have been a little bit later in 2018, like maybe the fall. But
yeah, Dev has a weird theory. He's like, GamerGate never ended. This isn't second GamerGate, but you're not Dev, so I'm not interviewing him. There's just lots of different thoughts. I think he is also. Would you consider him an expert on GamerGate, though? I'm just curious.
I mean, I like Dev. We get along fine. I've talked with him on stream and stuff. Possibly, I'm either interviewing him or he's interviewing me, one of the two. At some point, possibly, he mentioned. He knows probably more about it than like a lot of people do, but he was also really only involved in like the very, very beginning, because he made the Indefensible videos that were really popular. He talking about the alleged corruption within the IGDA or Indie Fest or IndieCade. It's been a minute since I've seen the videos. But within the indie game
enemy Phil Fish.
So he made those videos, and like that's an area where he probably does have a lot of knowledge. I know that some people have criticized those videos too. I know Thydrin, he criticized some of those videos. He thought that maybe he didn't get everything right. I don't looked into this. I don't like, but I'd say that he has a fairly good level of knowledge on the topic, about the very beginning at least. But he also I think he was out basically by 2015. So he was only, again, maybe I think he was on Twitter still, so he might have tweeted about it a few times, but he wasn't like actively engaged as much with the topic.
It was a GamerGate tourist. They're everywhere. So do you want to follow up with that, Gray Man? Okay.
I was basically just wondering on that, but yeah.
Like, to be clear, like he does talk about it a lot. He does care about it a lot. Like I wouldn't just say like, you know.
Hey, we can move on. I don't need you to say Dev is a commie like everyone else. Okay, that rumor goes around enough. Okay, he's got his hot takes. Let's not try to put him in more boiling water with his expertise here. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I am curious about everyone's thoughts about GamerGate now that it's supposedly GamerGate 2, which I don't think very highly of because I don't see much ethics in it. But let's not get bogged down by that. Maybe towards the end, I'll grill you on that. Okay. But yeah, silly post. Glorious Master Race. I got a ton of questions. Like the first one I got was hilarious. Okay, just to throw this out. Let me read it verbatim. Great starting question. What is Gamergate about? A, incredibly corrupt, incestuous game media types, or B, nerds on the internet being mean to women? Answer that question and you'll know if the book is going to be worth a fuck. Some people in my community, okay,
Well,
the binary, I cannot agree with the binary thing.
I guess I do have a question for you, kind of along those lines, because you said that you were kind of
Okay.
interviewing people on both sides of this, so you did get both gamergaters and anti-gamergaters. Have any of their positions kind of changed over these last few years? Like,
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry, finish your question.
I was just thinking, like, I know I've seen specifically Brianna Wu kind of saying a few different things than she had said back in the day, but I guess that's kind of it as far as I've heard anyone even kind of
I'll
changing
have a
their
question
tune.
regarding that in a bit. But
Well,
Yeah,
some people definitely go ahead. Okay, some
I
people
was going to
definitely
say,
have
in
changed
your
their
experience
changed
with
their
these
views.
interviews, did anyone really change their experience
So
or
it's
change their
not
interpretation of it?
it's not super common. Some people do change their views. Like Bash Fluff, he changed his views during GamerGate though. He started off very pro GamerGate, but then he disagreed with it because he thought that it was becoming too anti-SGW in his view. Um, and so he basically declared himself anti-GamerGate, and then he moderated on the debate subreddits and switched sides on there. It's just, but like so he changed his mind on it. He's not like anti-GamerGate in the sense that he's like, oh, they're harassers who hate women. He's anti-GamerGate in the sense that like too many of the GamerGate people are anti-SJW, and I don't like that. And he disagrees with them.
yeah,
And then like
Ian Miles Chung, not that you would
well,
consider him a good actor, but
yeah, I would not consider him a good actor. He's changed his view, maybe for reasons that aren't entirely good, because he's a Russian propagandist now. But also Peter Coffin changed his mind on GamerGate recently, and
Did he?
yeah, I interviewed him. He's actually changed his view. He's actually like really he's not pro GamerGate, but he's neutral now. He identifies as.
Well, because
But
he seemed
he's
to
very
be,
much
his heels were pretty dug in before. That's
not
that's
anymore at
interesting.
all.
I hadn't heard that.
You should
Wow.
watch the interviews if you're interested.
I'm
And
looking
then
forward to it.
yeah, I don't think Brianna's like changed her view too. Like you mentioned her. I don't think she's like she still thinks GamerGate was bad, but she.
For
there was a
sure.
whole kerfuffle
Yeah, I'm
in the
not-
last few days on that.
But
I
I'm
am
not trying to say
curious
that
on
she
that
has
front.
completely
I'm not gonna-
switched. I just heard her kind of soften her take on it a little
She's
bit.
she's willing to talk with some of the GamerGate people, and she says that there were some good people involved. But she's also, I don't know what her current view is. You have to ask her because I know that she's been undergoing like a metamorphosis on this recently. So
Yeah, you might not know about
Yeah.
this, but I heard about supposedly. Let's not get into the scary thing that's Milo, but supposedly he did an investigation on her to sort of find out dirt about her. I wonder how, given Milo's sort of penchant for, do you know personally if the investigation he did on Brianna Wu was solid or not, or do you not know?
I would not trust Myelinopolis as a source, as a general matter.
Okay.
Now, as for like if it's like specific information was accurate or not, I don't know. If you're talking about like the speculation about her being transgender, I don't care about that. I'm not looking into that. I don't think that's a big deal to me at
Yeah,
all. So.
I think that's a small potatoes. There's mild discussion about that, some controversy. I don't want to go into that too much. She wasn't a really big part from what I know. She was sort of a hang me on that wasn't quite with the cool kids like Anita and Zoe Quinn and everyone else and that fun stuff. From what I know.
She wasn't
but
in
her
the
harassment was
chat stuff,
really
but-
like forefront there for a while. She was definitely some of the claims and some of the supposed proof that people were being harassed by GamerGaters.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure I know there are examples of people who engaged in what you could reasonably call harassment against her, including at least one GamerGate or two GamerGate people, like depending on how you define this, and did so. I wouldn't be surprised if other people sent her inappropriate messages as well.
For sure. It's the
Yeah.
internet. Like, yeah. And people love to pile on. So, yeah, I'm sure. But that being said, I mean, there were some very major news pieces about how horrible gamers were and how this is all just misogyny. I'm so sorry. My bird just decided to scream right then.
Yeah,
do you think
that's
that has
opinion.
kind of died down, the journalist opinion, or do you think they still kind of have that opinion that like gamers are dead and they're all just misogynist? Like, did that essentially change, or am I
Well,
just not seeing it in the forefront anymore?
I don't think like the gamers are dead thing is. I think they lost on that basically 100%. Because like I don't think that there's like this great fear of people like calling themselves gamers in society. Or like I don't think the term's really like gone away even. So I don't think that they won on that front. I don't think they even really want to do that anymore. I think they realized that that was a bad idea. Like even Leigh Alexander, she says, at least, not I wouldn't trust her as a source either, by the way. But she says that she almost got fired because of her article and how much backlash it got. So I don't think they want to
Really,
do
I
that. Now,
hadn't heard that.
as for their change on like GamerGate, like I think that unfortunately a lot of the press, insofar as the mainstream press talks about this, they talk about it mostly through that like the harassment slash sexism lens, or like the far right lens. Like Asia Romano of Vox wrote an article, and she chickened out of an interview too after agreeing to one. Um, but they're mostly looking at it through that lens. I think that most of them don't really like know anything about GamerGate, and they just either one are ideologically biased, like the Guardian piece, for instance, recently, where they mentioned GamerGate in like 2 sentences. But they make the headline about GamerGate, but they were covering the Sweet Baby stuff, and they're talking about like the far right gamers. You had like a BBC presenter, or someone who works with the BBC, call for like a final purge of gamers recently, or
Oh
of certain types
God.
of gamers, right? So like
Control.
there's definitely people who have, um, like negative views towards GamerGate still. I don't, but who knows? We'll see. Right now, I'm not having
Yeah,
a
it
lot of
got
mainstream people aren't
Donald
interviewing me for
Trump
this project.
elected.
Well, that's
Uh,
what some people claim, and that's it's not even true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you look into it, it really started with ethics. As you said, they had a whole discussion about what Gamergate should be about. I don't think any of that was about politics really at all. That was just dishonest games journalism and their cahoots with indie people.
Now there
Now we
were
got this.
grifters who
Go
tried to
on.
make it more political, though. I should point out, like it's not like there were zero people trying to politicize it.
Oh,
Oh,
probably
for
grifters
sure.
on both sides.
Oh yeah, sure, on both sides
It
for sure.
launched a bunch of grifters on both sides. It kind of seems like
Yeah.
you mentioned the Milo side, but he's not the only one that kind of came from that side as well. But do you feel like that is? Well, I guess. Sorry, Vincent said we'd get to that in a little bit, so never mind. Vincent, sorry, did you have a question, man?
No. I'm letting you go. I'll interrupt you guys whenever I want. This is my show. This is not a democracy here. This is something. Go on.
Fair enough. Do you feel like there is kind of a definitive winner in this? Like, it does seem like one side made significantly more money off of this whole incident. Would you
Which side
consider
is
that
that,
being a
Gray?
winner?
Yeah, which side
Well,
was that one?
it doesn't. I could be wrong, but it seems like it launched like Sarkeesian. Like it put a bunch of people kind of more in the. I know, for instance, like her. Now I'm forgetting what the funding site was, but it seemed to have a lot more backing than a lot of them from the GamerGate side. If I
Yeah, all
incorrect
the
in remembering
scams.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
want to go that far and
So-
call them scams, but it did seem like there was more money that was able to make from kind of the we're getting harassed side. Let's make something else, as opposed to. I know you brought up like the sites and everything, but it didn't seem like those were like huge kind of money makers on the GamerGate side. Am I totally wrong in kind of looking at it that way?
I mean, some people made money off of it for sure. Like on the Pro GG side, I'm sure like anybody who got like all the YouTubers who got ad revenue covering it for sure.
Oh,
Some
for
people
sure.
also got money
Yeah, I
through
think
like
the YouTube side is who raked it in there.
like I donated to some of the people's Patreons, and like there's like a few bucks. And, like the biggest ones, I think I did donate ironically enough to Sargon of Akkad, which is ironic. I gave him like $10 or something, and then like Liana Kurzner, I supported her, um, and like maybe like $20, which like 10 to 20, and then like Deep Freeze I supported too. But like these were all small potatoes, stuff. There was crowdfunding for Airplay too that never happened. Um, that was not organized by the SBJ. That was organized by Aaron Pabone and the Games Journalism Network, a separate group. Um, but they did issue refunds to everybody that they could. He was just incompetent. But like, so there were people raising money on both sides. And a lot of charity money too got raised. But I think that probably most of the money was more on the anti-Gamergate side because you look at like their Patreons and stuff. It was
Yeah.
wild. It was like well, it was like 30 something $1,000 a month for some of these people.
Yeah, that's kind of what I remember. And I mean, I know it launched the careers of people, and like Milo got like a good book deal off of it, but
I'm about
I don't
100
know.
something thousand. Hang on, like actually, I can pull up the numbers.
Okay,
But
numbers.
yeah, I was just
numbers,
wondering. From what
numbers.
it doesn't feel like the memory is necessarily going to the side of the anti-gamer gates. Like it
Well, you
does
get the
feel like that.
Wikipedia now. It's a harassment campaign on Wikipedia, but we all know how biased Wikipedia is. Okay. Then there's the whole thing with your censorship, Tachyon Blue, and also the GamerGate. What was this conference that's
Thirteen
going to be
thousand.
going on?
$13,000 was the highest that I saw from one of the people, and that was only for like some months. But yes, so I got censored on TikTok. Well, I'm shadow banned there. It seems I'm not getting
Well,
any
it's
views all of a
Chinese
sudden.
run. There's the other one,
And
Mastodon, I believe.
Mastodon.social, not the full Fediverse, but the
Okay.
main Mastodon network.
This
They
seems
banned me
weird.
for hate speech supposedly.
Yes, I know you talk so many slurs and hateful things about, you know, having an open discussion and trying to get different people viewpoint. So hateful.
Well, I'm very strong inward enjoyer, so I'm sure you understand.
Yeah. You have bad associations, probably, but yeah. But yeah, that sort of indicates where we are nowadays. And now we just have Gamergate tours, what they want to call that, probably gonna skew people's opinion. What are your thoughts? Do you think people are gonna identify this new movement going on against Sweet Baby Inc. with the movement before? Just your thoughts on
People have
the
already
conflation.
tried to do that, but I don't think that there's going to be like a movement. I'm not sure like there is a movement now, like a Gamergate 2 movement. I don't call it that, generally speaking. Like if someone asks me like an interview or something, I'll run with it. Um, but I don't want to consider Gamergate 2 because like Gamergate 1 was like a very very different dynamic. Well, one was like about different
Yeah.
stuff for the most part,
For
and then
sure.
Yep.
two, it had very different dynamics too. Like it very much was like a, I guess what you would, when I hate to say it, like a movement. Some people disagree with that framing, but like there was very clear like people running operations, talking with other people, had a whole hashtag that was regularly used, and it was a very much like an ongoing live thing. Whereas I don't like feel like that's the case with this. It's just people who are opposed to social justice stuff in gaming, um, coming like they're not even coming together necessarily, but like they're talking about it a lot. And there's a lot of controversies
Mhm.
recently. So like the Stellar Blade controversy, for instance, um, and others as well. So people are talking about that. But we can talk about the conference too later on if you want. If we can circle back to that.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
that's a
that would
good
be.
example of something that would
But I
actually
just
be worth a petition. Okay,
let
that
me
seems like it would be something worth a petition to bring up. Okay,
now. You mentioned like the GamerGate 2 stuff, quote unquote. Like some of the people involved in this, I do have like a low opinion of the Sweet Baby controversy. I guess like I defended Cabrutus when he got
yeah,
attacked.
so did I. Okay, I actually admired him for coming clean about that whole, what was it, using the IMDb, which is just as easy to sort of edit as Wikipedia, for actually probably easier, less oversight than Wikipedia, and him dropping that. But let's get your thoughts. I've made my thoughts on that
Well, then
very widely known.
you both you and I know. I don't know about you, Gray, but then he spread misinformation about a friend of mine actually, E. Zhang.
Really?
Uh, yeah.
I just kind of followed it at the beginning, when that kind of blew up, but I didn't hear about the misinformation. I'm so sorry to hear that.
No, it's I mean, she's a tough woman. She just basically corrected what he was saying because he tried to claim that she was hiring people based on race, and immutable characteristics, but that's obviously not true.
No, there's the N word for you, JP Mexican. Go on.
So yeah, basically, this information was not true, and when um, myself and others tried to point this out, he didn't do anything about it. He didn't issue a correction. He didn't apologize, and she was even willing to talk with him. She even said like, "Hey, look, I'm willing to talk. What's?" But he just completely ignored her. never acknowledge his mistake at all.
Yeah, and that's not a good way to start a movement or continue it. Okay, you need to be able to take criticism. Let's pull back. I don't want to pull back in this. Criticism taken. That just brings up a question. How well did the GamerGaters? Of course, we know how the anti-GamerGates took criticism. Well, do you think they took criticism well before we move on to the GamerGaters? How they took criticism? How did both sides take sort of criticism from
So
their own side or from the opposition?
both sides, both sides obviously got criticized a lot. I think that the pro GamerGate side was always more willing to have a conversation. You could probably find individuals, like today at least, Captain Carbine is closed off to discussions with people who disagree with him. But I'm sure, from my experience, the GamerGate people, they're more like liberal in like the traditional sense. So like they're more willing to like believe in discussion and free speech and dialogue and neutrality, like trying to be like fair. But obviously, there's people who anytime you get a larger group of people like this, you might run into some people who aren't open-minded. But I think for the most part, they were open to discussion and debate, and like they were always willing to talk with people, journalists, people debating people on live streams, debate subreddits that still exist to this day, like GG discussion, in some cases. So like I think they were always willing to have the conversation. Some of the anti-GamerGate people at the time too were. Like the debate subreddits, there were people there who were anti-GamerGate, and also like in jumping on streams and some YouTubers willing to talk. But most of the people, especially like the people in like the upper clique, if you want to call it that, like the people who were like in like the Skype group, with like Zoe Quinn, Catherine Cross, Nina Sarkeesian, Peter Coffin, Ian Miles Chung, and a bunch of other people. Like the people in like that group were generally pretty closed off to having conversations with people who disagreed with them.
Well,
And by
did they not
generally,
get
I mean
any?
completely, pretty much.
Did they not get any criticism from their own side?
Sure. Like people on Ghazi would like occasionally voice criticism, like especially like Sarkeesian's work, and disagree with her on like certain points, right? More like on the debate subreddits too, which was like a little bit of a different crowd than just Ghazi, because they were a bit more moderate people on the debate subs who were anti-GamerGate. They would like voice disagreements. And some people like were really upset with one of the inner circle people, Sarah Nyberg, who was allegedly grooming a child. Her cousin. It was this whole massive scandal that blew up. A lot of people were criticized that, like Helicopter Guy, disavowed her publicly.
Okay. So they takes freaking grooming charges of a minor to
But
fucking
it was other
get
people
kicked out of
defended her
that
too.
clique.
But
Oh, of course.
yeah.
There will be those types there. But yeah.
Oh, and
from what I
they did
see,
condemn. They did Gamer Ghazi, at least I should say, did condemn the Zek Attack doxing group. So there's a group of
oh, okay.
doxers with like Izzy Galvez, who is Amazon's trust and safety person, or one of their people at least.
Okay.
Him and some other people too, including Pal Hofstein, a Ubisoft game developer. We're in this group chat on Twitter called Zek Attack. We called it Zek Attack after it came out.
Good
But
name. Sack Attack.
yeah, so they tried to dox Mombot, a GamerGate supporter, because I guess they didn't like her too, and then also she had some personal beef with 9volt, one of the other members of the group, and so because of this, they wanted to dox her, but it was infiltrated, and by a GamerGate person pretending to be anti-GamerGate infiltrated the group and released all the information about them trying to dox her.
Okay. Yeah, it's always.
But Ghazi did condemn them, to be clear, but like the inner circle didn't say anything about it, I don't think.
You had something, Gray?
I was just saying, damn, I did not realize that had all gone down, the kind of attempted doxing, and then the, I guess you'd call it
there's an article about it. You can
spy
up,
mission in there?
Rudderhouse
awesome.
ran that, and Mombot. They work together.
Yeah, all things get lost to time. Like I didn't know Sargon I think I've heard Sargon talk about doing a game. I didn't know about people criticized him for failing to go and not exactly being ethical and trying to look down people. But I almost want to give him some I don't want to be too hard on him back in the day, despite how I'm critical of him nowadays. Let's not get too focused on that particular little angle there. But anyone else you want to call out? Any drama you want to start? Maybe I can do
Hey,
a
you're
clip
trying really
that.
hard to do that.
Yeah. Well, you gotta get a little bit of a controversy going, little hot takes. I mean, I appreciate trying to be honest, but blood sports was a thing back in the day. Hell, Ethan Routh, I think, notorious in that era, and even going forward. There were so many actors that came out of GamerGate, but how many of them made their name off of GamerGate, and how many of them were just grifting? That will be all. That's something we would have to have mind reading powers to know
Yeah, there's probably
exactly with that.
it's I don't know. I don't know how many of these people. Well, one, like, how many of them actually like believe the things that they were saying, right? And then two, how much of their success, like Milo, for instance, like how much of his success was because of GamerGate versus like him getting some bump from GamerGate, but then also managing to like the way he operated, which I don't think is like a good way to operate. To be clear, to be like a bomb thrower and like give out as many hot takes as possible and attack people on a personal level. I'm a supportive of that.
Oh well,
But
it
like
caught up with him in the end.
there was true, it did, but there was like a market for that, and he was
For
able to
sure.
fill that niche at the time. And so I don't know like how much of his success was like because of GamerGate specifically versus him recognizing that there's this niche he could perform in until a
For
time.
sure. I might be giving him too much credit by saying it's what kind of launched him. It's the first time I heard his name kind of mentioned was his GamerGate articles. But fair enough. I think that dude was looking to be controversial no matter what. So I'm sure he would have found another issue if it wasn't that.
Yeah. I mean, Dev keeps on typing up like, I had some trouble. I sort of backed off. I could have been as big as Sargon and all these other guys. I think he's blowing hot smoke, but it's good to have a little bit of an ego sometimes.
Well, Dev's got
and
a big following.
Yeah, he does. And
I don't agree with a lot of his politics, though, I don't
haters.
think. We agree on some stuff, I think, but
yeah, his politics, I can get along with the basic stuff, but he needs the trucker video. Okay, he needs to do it eventually, but again, too deep in the sauce with that. Sheesh, I could still got some questions that I should probably get. Do you? This is a good one. Do you ever think the relationship between gamers and journalists will ever be repaired?
I mean, like, hopefully, but like I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not a
Well, the
fortune
art
teller.
of journalism is changing and morphing.
Yes, it's like it depends
So
on what you mean by journalism, right? Because like there's already people like if you ask certain people like Amanda Maroon, right? He has like certain YouTubers he talks about who he's like, well, I watch it was Yang Ye, for instance, and it was Shift Up, I believe he said too. He's like, well, look, I trust
Kanye.
their gaming news. Um, and so like other people will find like certain like podcasts or streamers or YouTubers who like they think do a good job, and like they're performing journalism to some extent, or some of them are at least. So like, is that games journalism? I guess in some ways it is, right? So, like, but if you mean like text based, like, will people trust not any specific outlet, let's say, but like they generally trust that if they're reading a gaming news site, that they're going to be getting like the accurate information or ethical information. There's no major conflicts of interest. That there's the full story being presented, like both sides. I don't see that happening anytime soon necessarily, because unfortunately, I think that the players in the industry either one want to avoid drama, and like there's certain sites that will like, basically don't really engage in that kind of quote unquote journalism. But there's other
That's
sites too, like
risky.
Kotaku, that are happy to thrive on that, right? That's where they make their money, I guess, right? When it's them trying to write stories that they find a little bit more salacious, but also have like a more social justice oriented bent, and they leave out certain aspects of the story, and that I think is something that continues to harm their reputations. But games journalism, I mean, I don't know how much people trust them in general. Like we should be able to trust that, like if Kotaku investigated a story, that they did a thorough job doing so. But we can't trust that to be the case. And I'm not sure that like the incentives are aligned for them specifically to do that. I guess they think they're going to make money by targeting this more niche, like progressive audience. And so they're going to continue to pander to them, which is fine, except they don't always behave in ethical ways when they do so.
Yeah, I think the whole left leaning Kotaku types what definitely could go with more normie lefty takes because there's definitely a lot of YouTubers that I've seen who could get behind some of their ideas if they weren't pushing such crazy stuff that makes even their sort of moderate lefty takes. If they went more center and went with they could still have a little bit of clickbait and still present things in a way that would come across to a general audience in a much better way, in my opinion. Okay, they should really lean into that, but I don't know why they resisted the ethics argument back in the day. Do you think they were just trying to hide the misdeeds between journalists and indie devs of those days legitimately? Or do you think they
Um,
really believed it was a harassment campaign?
I mean, it might be like a mix of both. But
Okay.
I think there was probably mostly them knowing that it wasn't, because like we see like the gamers, or we saw like the Game Journal Pros list, for instance, right? When those leaked out, we have several members of this group, this Game Journal Pros group, were talking about how they didn't wanted Greg Tito at the Escapist to not allow discussion of this to happen on his forums. They were basically trying to pressure him into censoring, and even the founder of the Escapist talks about this too when I interviewed him. There was like this pressure campaign to try and get people to shut up about this and make sure that it doesn't happen. Um, and then like the Gamers for Dead articles, that probably was collusion to try and like kill the story. I guess they thought that like if we just all come out at once and condemn this, and maybe like some of those specific articles, maybe some of them were like trying to bandwagon on. Maybe not every single person who wrote a Gamers for Dead article. Like there's like 28 of them, or so. No, like, there's like 19 of them. Sorry. Um, uh, like not every single one of them necessarily colluded, but some of them might have just been kind of bandwagon off of it, or talking about other sites are talking about. But they definitely
Yeah.
wanted. I think they did definitely want to kill the story, and that's why they basically tried to come up with this like misogynistic harassment story. Basically, I
Okay.
mean, which, and plus like the burgers and fries stuff. Like if you're like a normal person, and you're like, well, okay, I got all this weird stuff happening, all these scandals happening, and then like there's this weird chat room called Burgers and Fries on Ryzen IRC. Well, your average person's like, what the fuck is a IRC chat room? So they might just be like, well, look, there's probably was people were harassing her, but
Yeah.
there's not really
Can you
evidence like
not?
of specific harassment
How do you
that she went
disprove
through.
harassment? Okay. You just have
Yeah.
to say, yeah, you need to toughen up. Okay. This is going to be something you're going to need to deal with. We're not going to encourage it. Okay. But you shouldn't use it as a shield. There's many things that could have been done, but hindsight's 2020. And you got anything thoughts in your head, Gray? I'm not running out of steam this early, but I don't want to overtake it. Things.
No, I have absolutely no thoughts in my head. Um, no, it's just it's a really interesting story. I guess I don't know. It just kind of makes me wonder. Do you think that this had like long-lasting effects on journalism or on game journalism specifically, or I don't know. It makes me wonder because it feels like the actual narrative that kind of made it to the media is not necessarily the true one, but that's kind of where that whole journo thing would be, is kind of in the media. I don't know. Do you think it had long lasting impacts on the actual journalism itself, or do you think
Um,
it was just kind of more the movement that it created at the time?
I think it's, well, I don't know how much lasting impacts GamerGate really had. I think like one of the biggest things is that for a large number of people, this was a moment where they lost trust in the media, or
For
it
sure.
decreased their trust. And I think that that was like a major issue because they saw right before their eyes that they were being lied to, essentially, um, and that certain aspects of the story were being covered up or not being talked about. Um, and so I think that that harmed the credibility in the press to a high degree. Like as for like specific reforms, I think like disclosure's gotten better in games journalism. Part of that too is like the FTC, but also that's partly GamerGate because Operation I don't remember which one the fuck it was, but there was an operation to try and get people to contact the FTC and get them to do something about disclosure, and they actually did. So that's GamerGate among one voice, several voices, I guess, among the overall pressure in society to bring that about. Um, that change. So disclosure, I think they got better on. But when it comes to like the long-lasting impacts on media, I don't know. I don't think that Gamergate had long-lasting political impacts necessarily, at least not like in the ways we would normally think about it, because it wasn't like a left-right issue. Um,
Yeah.
but to some extent, like I think that like the culture war stuff, like Gamergate probably had some impact on like the early culture war. Um, but because Gamergate itself was such a diverse group of people, they themselves disagreed on the culture war stuff and kind of splintered.
Yeah.
Like that's probably one of the reasons it fell apart.
Yeah, well, do you know if it was the first one of these movements? Because I know there was a sad pumpy attempts in pretty much novel writing. Then there was Comics Gate. I mean, it's probably not your purview. You're assume, I believe you're calling it the first movement. Do you agree?
Well, I wouldn't first battle the culture war. I think is what my first title of the book was.
Yes.
But I don't think I'd stand by like that framing today.
Okay.
I think in
Okay.
some ways it became. I think in some ways it was like the first battle of the culture war, but like not because of like anything like mostly because by accident. Like I don't think that people were like jumping in like, oh boy, let's create a culture war. Like some people did, but I don't think that was like the majority thrust of it. I think it became that over time to some degree, um, because it became such a polarizing issue. But yes, there was the sad puppies controversy, and like I don't know, like there's always like what the fuck's a culture war, right? Because
Yeah.
cultures are always constantly changing, and there's always disputes and debates about what's acceptable, what's not, what's good and what's not. And those are like healthy conversations for society to have, and we should have those conversations. But like this was one of the one of the major times that a lot of people can think of, at least Gamergate was, and the Sad Puppies as well, where there was this very heated dispute about that. And unfortunately, instead of a conversation happening, I feel like one side felt like they had power and they exercised that power to prevent a discussion. And like that, I think that I don't know enough about the sad puppies specifically or the comics get stuff. Um, I think with the sad puppies, that's what happened too. From what little I've looked into with this, and I talked with some of those
Yeah,
people,
I think
I
it
think they got fucked.
mirrors Gamergate experience. There was some, I mean, Gamergate even had a group who didn't think the Gamergaters as large were uh, going far enough. So they
Yeah.
created a splinter cell off of, I believe, the major group to become, which probably I think had a much more right leaning thing. And Sad Puppies had Rabbit Puppies. So it seems to go parallel. We even have Comicsgate still fighting. This whole thing of Nick Rekieta is bringing up Comicsgate again. I don't want to go too deep into it. It's just interesting how, but I don't actually see that happening too much on the left. As much as they talk about division fighting in the left, they seem to have stayed pretty solid on this narrative. You think that
Well,
helped them?
we say the left, like the Gamergate people were left wing, or well,
Uh, yeah,
a
sorry.
plurality
Should I
of them.
say the far left? Okay,
It's not
yes.
even like far. It's
Sorry, I
more
keep
like the illiberal
mischaracterizing.
left.
You're probably right. Neoliberal to leftists
No,
or on.
illiberal left.
Oh, yes, a liberal left. Sorry, I
Yes.
misheard you. I thought
Yeah.
you
So
said neoliberal left, and let's not get into neoliberal
but
left. But yeah, a liberal.
the whatever you want to call them, because like there's so many different words for it. Like because like there is like this weird clique of like I don't know if I gotta click anymore, but like it's this weird like ideological grouping. I think he said it's like the hidden tribes data too. Um, I think at 8% they put it at hidden tribes, so that's like depends on how you define this stuff. Um, but like I don't know if you call it like 8% of the population or whatever who've bought into like this woke quote unquote for like lack of a better term ideology where
Yeah.
like they have abandoned the idea of discussion altogether, from like a like left wing point of view because of the paradox of tolerance, for instance, and they have like a lot of different justifications for this. Um, but like that cohort of people has been really reticent to change their mind on the Gamergate stuff, and I don't know how we get through to those people, or maybe we just. I think that like if you're buying into like these illiberal ideologies, you probably shouldn't be in positions of power. Like it shouldn't be like illegal for you to be like a woke person in a position of power, of course. But like I think that as a society, we should value ethics in people. And so if you see people who are lying, if you see people who are trying to silence others or bully others, I think that people should stand up and do what's right, regardless of your political association. And if you're having somebody like that on like the far left or the far right or centrist or whatever the fuck, then you should say something and oppose. Like try to not give these people power if you can.
Yeah, positions of power
Sure.
should be more like, I think it should be more like referees, okay? Incentives for people in power, they tend to accumulate more power. We should sorry, let me not get too far in my thoughts. I just think people in power should actually have just a stable place where they shouldn't get all these all these wonderful benefits by giving themselves more power, more like a neutral power. But that's a completely separate matter altogether. I'm trying to keep myself from off railing. I'd love to do that, and I'm sorry, gents. So I'll throw this back over to Gray. Another reason to have Gray on. Anything else
Uh,
up? I had go.
yeah, sure. So obviously, I'm not trying to like paint you as a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. So I don't want it to be like that. But do you think the same issues that plagued the ethics and game journalists in journalism, excuse me, would be existing in other forms of media as well, or is this an isolated incident?
It's difficult to tell because I'm not like a media expert. I'm not like done tons and tons and tons of research into like how the press operates. Um, but so I don't know how representative it is. Like obviously you have different people. Like in the so like, it boils down to like the GamerGate case, for instance, right? The games press themselves. I think
Yeah.
for a lot of them, what basically happened is they they a lot of these people had like an ideological predisposition towards not hearing out opposing views, and that they were like on the right side of history, and so fuck everyone else. And so like so you have these people who have these views, and they also are like have friends with one another. That's like normal kind of dynamics you can expect from humans to some extent. And then they use like their power and influence to exert their will through like the means that they could. And so like that's like one specific thing that happened like in the games press. But like do like these dynamics exist in other media too? Like I'm sure like people with like conservative or liberal outlets like probably feel pressure like maybe to cover certain stories more. Because like that's what their audience wants to hear, or like that's what their like biases are towards, so they're going to cover certain stories. Like I don't think that like generally speaking that like it depends like what you're talking about, what website you're talking about, right? Or what organization. But like I think that like generally speaking, if you're talking about like a major newspaper like New York Times or like the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal, I don't think that they like generally try to like deliberately lie as a general matter. I think they try to like get the story straight. But like again, it's a case by case basis, and you're dealing with like individual journalists who might be corrupt, or editors who miss things, or even journalists who just get the story wrong, right? So like there's so many different like, and of course there's people have different like. I'd like to think that they try to get the stories right and do a good job. It doesn't always happen. I think also too, like one thing that we saw with GamerGate, I think is a lot of these sites. Two things that I've noticed, um, like, well, if you're talking about like the early coverage of GamerGate, one thing you're talking about like is they like not many of these people like wanted to like reach out to GamerGate supporters for comment or to talk about them, to talk
Mhm.
with them for their articles, and like part of that too is because some of these sites they just relied almost entirely on I think what the games press was saying, and so they talked to the games journalists or they read articles from games journalists and they tried to like write stories based on that. Others like at the Guardian probably had like more of an ideological bias since the Guardian was a lot more like culturally woke back then and today. So like them specifically being a more mainstream outlet, they probably covered it from like a specific angle because of that. And then also too, um, fuck, I lost my train of thought with this. Where was I going to go with it?
You were going on a long journalistic thing. What's the worst cancel attempt that you think occurred in Gamergate? Okay, because we all know that there was several cancellation or at least attempts going on back and forth. Okay, well, mainly on the journalist side, they had the power after all. What do you think is the worst case of that?
It might be like Tim Surrey, I guess. Tim Surrey, he's a game developer. He's working on the game The Last Night. He's still working on it. He announced it at a conference. Everybody was really excited because it looked like a really cool game, cyberpunk game. Um, but Zoe Quinn tweets out that he's her harasser, and a lot of the gaming sites, I believe, write about this. And uh, her evidence for this was that he tweeted about GamerGate twice one of which he did criticize feminism, and another which he talked about ethics. Um, and so she's saying, I don't know if the feminism one was a GamerGate tweet specifically, but she included that as evidence that he's a bad guy. But she tried to basically, it seemed like, because she's saying, oh, this guy's my harasser, to her massive Twitter following, and then journalists were writing about it, that it had a very negative impact on his career. And she says that he it's like sad to see my harasser on stage being applauded or something like that.
Yeah, I see these terms being thrown
Then
around, and I really wish there was a way to really determine harasser, stalker. They're just throwing these terms around, and I'm like, is it really that? How can you really determine that within an sort of a
but they're
methodology? Because everyone's your thoughts on the sort of convoluted nature of what's harassment versus criticism? Because there's definitely some thoughts that any criticism or talking about like Mundane Matt got a D. I think what helped kick it off on the YouTube sphere was Mundane Matt being his video being DMCA'd by Zoe
yeah,
Quinn because he
allegedly by Quinn. Yeah.
allegedly, yes, okay, you're, but yeah, the sort of Streisand effect, but it not going too far, still being in circles, and I assume he got. Did he ever get what's your thought of the sort of Streisand effect helping it along? Of course, there was
Uh,
first the article by what's his name? I'm losing the
Zoe
name with
Post,
the five
Aaron
guys.
Joni,
This, yeah, Zoe Post that was blew up along internet, not the internet historian, whoever
internet aristocrat,
Medicare
Medicare. Yeah.
aristocrat, yeah, Medicare.
Well, there were other
And
people who covered it too, including
yeah,
like Monday Matt. But
yes, a lot of people were on that. He got DMCA. The YouTube crowd took interest, and a lot of other people jumped
it wasn't
in.
just the DMCA. It was also 4chan did censor this as well. V did, and then so did Reddit, R Gaming at one point, and the Escapists, I believe, went back and forth. They ended up allowing it at the end of the discussions, but there was pressure behind the scenes to get them to censor it. So I think that RPG.net censored it. GOG allowed it for several years, but then later closed the thread.
Yep, and
But so yeah, I think
just
the censorship
saying,
blew it up for sure, 1000%. I mean, if all they had to do, right, these gaming sites would just be like, hey, look, we made some mistakes. Here's what we're going to do moving forward to address the issues, and you know, we're going to have a dialogue with people who have concerns about ethics, and if you have genuine concerns, let's talk about it. That's all they really had to do, but they decided not to go that route. Many of them did.
yeah, they
And
just
this
try.
blew it up because of they tried to cover it up
Yeah,
because they tried to censor it.
down, doubling down. Some not quite the Streisand effect of GamerGate 2. I don't want to call them that, but that's always a way to sort of get yourself in trouble. And of course, there was some speculation. I think the Zoe GoFundMe, it's really highly suspected she just blew that money to go to Japan. Anita, she got criticism. Like there was a whole bunch of stuff about her. Why would she need to steal and not credit some video game footage if she was asking for all this money to do her stuff? There was a whole bunch of funding suspect in there. And of course, there was a lot of previous footage, like her not talking, Anita Sarkeesian, just to be clear, not talk about not even really being a gamer. Okay. A lot of stuff come out. And of course, Phil Fish with it going up for awards twice and given money was going into that. Yeah, concerns. I don't think it's just about the ethics. It's about what these the money that getting these awards really also became a sticking point. One of the ethics things, and I think that was legitimate. Any thoughts about that sort of mess that I just spilled out of my mouth just now?
I do think that ethics are important. It was always kind of weird with the Gamergate stuff because like some people would only wanted to keep it about ethics in journalism or ethics in game journalism and not about other areas. Like that was a contentious issue, but it was something that was very widely discussed, including like the indefensible stuff. Um, what's happening with within these award ceremonies, that was a topic of conversation. And so also people talked about we'll talk about like crunch time and like just various other issues in the industry. There were
Well,
that was
that's still crunch is still a big issue nowadays. To
yeah.
be
So there were a
clear.
lot of people like wanting and like how we want to think about like there was attempts to get people to get to do a Battlefront 2 boycott possibly, but
Oh yeah,
uh
microtransactions.
cucks
That's still a
cucks like
running
me
thing.
opposed that because we didn't want to I didn't want to for better or worse, like my view was like, oh no, we shouldn't. One, I don't want to have like GamerGate approved lists of like, oh, here's the games that GamerGate approves. Like, no, there's no shot. I want that to happen, or GamerGate boycotts. And I didn't want to like. We had a lot of developers who supported the movement, so I didn't at the time want to like alienate them by having us like boycott their games. Like if you ask me today if we should have gone that route, I don't know. Like maybe we should have. But I also feel like at that point too, GamerGate was winding down a little bit by the Battlefront 2 controversy. What year was that? I don't really had the power that we did before in
Okay,
the
yeah.
beginning.
Power plays. Yeah, I mean, there's also let me just bring up this one article before we move on. I mean, yeah, I am gonna want to get into the sort of dynamic of how this is. The Escapist is quite an interesting little mess out there. I just want to bring this up, which definitely seems like a very interesting thing. This, oh shit, I went with the second statement. Okay, this is evolving this a little bit out of your purview. Wanted to jump this on you, but this guy pretty much he's went to court because he was fired for being alt right. There's a particular line in here that I found funny where someone lost job. Dennison of Reddit called him basically this whole story, which was quite interesting that I found. Russ Pitts, was he really a player in Gamergate at all? I'm
Um,
curious.
I I feel like I maybe heard the name before, but I don't know who they are.
Okay, this seems like the echoing of Gamergate, calling this guy alt right and firing him off of it. Basically slandering him, making it hard for him to work in the video game
The Escapist did
journalism
this.
sphere. Yeah. Okay.
Was this when was this specific? What year?
Oh, as far as I can tell, it happened the end of 2018. Okay.
Okay,
Seems
so I
like it
wasn't paying too
echoes of
close attention with the. Yeah, I wasn't paying too much close attention to the industry at the time. Um,
I mean, it's fair enough. It seems more like the echoes. So, let's bring up let's not do the censorship. It sucks and you can't really figure out that sort of censorship on TikTok. Chinese maybe makes sense. Who knows? There's a whole bunch of stuff, but Mastodon also just hate speech. That seems like total bullshit from what I know. Maybe you secretly go off the rails on Mastodon, but I really don't believe that from
you can
watching
even
your
see which
content.
ones. You can see at least well some of it cuts them off a little bit, but you can see what tweets I made or posts I made on Mastodon even in the video. It's in the screenshots too. That I there's a
Oh,
link in the
okay.
description. You can even see which posts I made that they supposedly dinged me for. It was like transphobia, ableism, racism, sexism, like their general hate speech kind of thing.
Yeah, it seems a little weird for Mastodon, but as you said, it's not really the offshoot. But what about this Gamergate conference and how they're invite Anita's coming out? Okay. And she's coming out of her little what are your thoughts on that and what is really getting into it? So
Okay. So Paul Johnson, he is the organizer of this conference. It's called Alt plus F4 at Lawrence Technological University in Michigan, and they've announced recently that they're going to do a conference in September of this year to discuss Gamergate. But they are only doing it from a one-sided perspective, or at least that was the initial idea. So they're having Anita Sarkeesian and several other people there. Several of the speakers have expressed anti-Gamergate sentiment in the past, like negative sentiment towards Gamergate. And then some of them are neutral. And they've never talked about Gamergate publicly at all, so who knows what their opinions are. Um, but they didn't include any voices of Gamergate supporters or people who were neutral. They did reach out to Chris Ferguson. He's a researcher who's done research in this area and is more neutral in Gamergate, and has been pretty like accurate in his research. Um, they did ask him if he wants to come or send stuff in, but they weren't going to pay for his lodging. So that never ended up happening. And they also recently I've been talking with them, and because several people have expressed concerns about the conference, including James Desborough, Grim Jim, if you know him. He's big in the tabletop gaming world. He wrote Inside GamerGate. Also, Raymond Wallman, the Airplay documentary filmmaker, he's expressed concern. So has Brad Glasgow and Brad Wardell, the CEO of Stardock. Brad Glasgow is a journalist. Chris Ferguson's expressed concern. Peter Coffin's expressed concern. A lot of people have expressed concern about the conference being one-sided. And so basically we've reached out to them and tried to get them to add more perspectives, add diversity of perspectives. Don't just have it be like a one-sided Gamergate is about, misogynistic terrorism or whatever. But I have a variety of viewpoints represented there. And supposedly in June, the conference organizer, Paul Jawson, is possibly going to be talking with me. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, when is that date and where is that going to be located in case people actually watch this and want to know?
I don't know yet. He said circle back with me in
Okay.
June. So he said sometime
Okay.
June 1st or 2nd, I'll email him and then we'll set something up. Hopefully.
And no idea of where it's going to be set up because I'm just a little bit
I'll
curious.
stream it on my channel, probably.
Okay.
Oh, you mean the
so
conference
stay
or do you
tuned.
mean like the
Yeah, the conference where
Oh, the
the
conference
conference is going
is well, I wouldn't like necessarily endorse it, like especially right now. We'll see how things go. But it's going to be in Detroit or near Detroit. I think it's the suburbs technically.
Okay. Just fairly wondering where geographically, like DC or West Coast. I'm Detroit. Seems like a fairly neutral place. Now, if they could just have a neutral perspective on Gamergate. And it seems like a weird thing. Why do you know why they're planning to set this up? Like a 10-year anniversary or something? Seems like
So
a weird thing just to
they want to
go on.
explore, I guess, well, let's just read what their website says, right? You can probably screen share it if you want, but
Yeah. If you
here,
drop
I'll
the
read it real
link
quick.
or okay.
In August of 2014, the hashtag Gamergate emerged online, used as a weapon deployed against women in the video games industry. Through online harassment tactics, including threats of physical violence, Gamergate constituted an instance of digital mass mobilization, deliberately attacking what was perceived to be a turn away from gaming culture's historical association with young male players. As commentators have since noted, Gamergate would have become the precursor to subsequent social media mass mobilizations, including disinformation campaigns, conspiracy theories, and online grievance culture. This conference seeks to revisit the social and cultural implications of Gamergate on its 10th anniversary. To be held over 4 days in September 2024, this gathering of academics, designers, and community participants is designed to extend current conversations of game development and game studios beyond the existing heteronormative hegemonic discourses through
Oh,
offering an integrated, multi-perspectival digital humanities retrospective focused on the social and technological sources and afterlives of Gamergate.
yeah, the framing just sounds horrible to start with. Definitely not getting any perspective. God rest. God rest. I mean, it's some interesting looking back and how one sided it is, both with the Wikipedia and with how it's perceived in here. I really hope that this conference will host it, but I'm not having very good thoughts with how society is. So, Godspeed to you guys with that. Any thoughts, Gray, with that angle? Is that sort of shape your perspective of how this goes along the current main game?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Just kind of hearing that description it didn't bode well to me, but that kind of is a throwback description. But yeah, I don't know if I have too many additional thoughts on that particular conference. I hope you are able to get that interview, and I hope the guy is forthcoming with his actual information, because I don't know, that just sounds, all that information just sounded a bit interesting to me. I'm not sure if that would accurately describe everything that's going on, but I don't know. I guess every conference has kind of an angle. I guess that might be theirs.
Yeah, I wonder how far-reaching it's going to be. Anita Sarkeesian come out of the woodwork when she hasn't talked about how long has it been? It was just
Been a
like a
minute.
year ago she closed down, but yeah, film frequency sort of was dwindling, and they finally closed their doors. I'm just wondering. She hasn't really been a relevant name within things. It just I'm
Well, she
just
did it.
wondering what
What
they're.
was it? What was the year that she made the comment about CG Product Red? Like 2019 was it, or 18? Where she talked
Yeah,
about
she was
how
trying to talk to them, but apparently they've gone ESG marketplace. I've looked into that a bit. Seems rather light, they go with sort of the women's stuff. I guess there's not a lot of black people to really put forward in that, and they're doing like solar cells. I went over that little video when that came up. I don't think she was probably a really influential figure with making that push.
well, she
Uh,
tried to blackmail them, right? I don't know if she worked for them at all.
Yeah, of course. She tried to pressure them into it, as a lot of these current consultant thing, like Sweet Baby Inc., sort of had conferences. I've just w- did they really have these like conferences back then? Is there any like recordings of these pretty much activists trying to pressure things back
Conferences?
in
Like, what do you mean? Like at
like
conventions or like their
GDC,
own conferences?
like
Oh,
being
so
invited?
I mean, like within the games industry, like there's like there's at least in the convention world broadly for geek culture, like there's a lot of panels you'll see sometimes, depending on the convention, of like diversity in gaming. I don't know if that's like illegitimate necessarily to have those discussions, as long as there's like a plurality of perspectives represented, or they try to do a good job in hosting an actual discussion on it. That's totally fine with me. Um, as for like GDC and stuff, I've never been to GDC personally. I know that this year there were some controversies. There was the big scream that everybody saw. Um,
Yeah, that wasn't a good look. Sorry, that was just funny. That's not something that you should really that sort of plays into the Big Red, not Big Red, that SJW meme that's been mm, going
yeah,
on for 10 years.
well, and like
Almost 10
so,
years.
there were two reasons for the scream, right? One of the scream reasons was that some people had lost their jobs, and so like if you lost your job and you wanted to let off steam, like I think that's like a fairly like understandable thing. Maybe not the world's most productive way to go about it, but whatever, you do you. But the other reason too was because they wanted to stop the GamerGate 2 hate mob that didn't exist.
Yeah.
So like yeah, I don't know, kind of cringe.
Yeah, I definitely cringe and definitely the pushback for that, and them with the Sweet Baby Inks. I mean, it was a pale comparison to the Gamer's Dad. They obfuscated, basically played devil's advocate for Sweet Baby Inc. and saying gamers are dumb, and that was very fucking foolish.
When they never
Okay,
talked
almost
about it in
more.
their stories, they never talked about the harassment Brutus received.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
also,
Brutus.
so these people are supposed to be like defenders of like women and minorities. That's how they like portray themselves. But when Brutus like actually did really fuck up and went after a woman in gaming, they didn't do anything. They were quiet.
Yep, I came for an
Because I guess
innocent
they
woman.
realized, yeah. So go ahead, Vincent.
No, I was just gonna say they came for a woman. They completely misinterpreted it, and they slammed other people for just omitting certain things.
Mhm.
There, it's a goddamn mess. Okay, they're just not walking the walk. I'm not seeing any introspections. So I don't want to call him Gamergate too. I don't think I'll go
Well,
with my
can I
other more.
can I ask you?
Yeah.
So you were saying that like it doesn't feel like it's the same as the movement because there was actually a movement with GamerGate 1. But do you think it is? it- would you still say that it earns the title of GamerGate 2, or do you think that
Personally, no.
without a movement, it's not? Okay, fair
But
enough.
I did polling on this because I did a survey. I've surveyed people pro, anti, and neutral. It's additional survey in addition to my normal book interviews, and we can just well, I'm not going to pull it up now because I'm screen sharing the browser I would use for pulling it up. But it's about like 30% of the GamerGate people. So I asked people on a scale from 1 to 10. Um,
Hmm.
27 pro GamerGate people filled this out. Now, some of them might have skipped this question, so it might be slightly less. And there's one GamerGate person who hasn't taken the survey yet because they had a major life event happen, but they're going to take it at some point, so it could change a little bit. But roughly a third of the people think that GamerGate 2, they rated a 6, between 6 and 10,
Hmm.
of being a GamerGate 2. And then everybody else was 5 or lower. I don't remember the exact breakdown. So I don't think that most of the people involved consider it GamerGate 2. But there is a significant cohort, like 30%, let's say roughly, who do think that that's an apt term. I guess
Hmm.
the question specifically was, I think it was, would you describe this as GamerGate too?
Yeah, and that was
Okay.
kind of the question I was trying to
Or no, I think
describe
it
you,
was
or have you
strongly
answer,
agree or
but you did that better.
yeah, strongly agree or strongly disagree. Is how it
Yeah.
is actually, and then it's the statement that they're strongly agree or disagreeing with between 1 to 10 is, I would personally consider this GamerGate too. I think that's the exact methodology. I believe it was.
Yeah.
I think
And
your question was much better than mine. But
Hmm.
so if it's not actually up to like the standards of like a Gamergate, do you think that this still kind of is birthed from the same place, or this is kind of caused by the original? I hear a lot of kind of tentative connections between people involved and people that are being used as certain consulting companies, and then perhaps even people that are funding it, which
So
is kind of
there's definitely parallels with GamerGate, like one of which is the media's extremely bad coverage of the situation, leaving out specific parts, in some cases deliberately leaving out information that would be in the public interest to know, and leaving out parts of the story to make it look one-sided. That's like one thing that's 100% um, similarity. And then two, I think that a lot of the same like ideological forces, quote unquote, that were doing the misrepresentation, and that probably exist within like the company like Sweet Baby Inc. and maybe other companies too. I don't know. Like this sort of like weird woke progressivism. Like that is like the same kind of ideological mindset that a lot of the anti-Gamergate people had. And
Yeah.
they
It
also
also
there's
has.
like a lack of discussion generally about this topic. Like Melissa
Yeah.
Mercante, I've reached out to her many times, other people as well, to see if they want to talk, and not too many of them will.
Yeah. It is
Though Soy
disappointing. I
Edel
think.
and Brianna Wu did with me, so I guess props to them. And then
Yeah.
Nicole Sund actually talked about possibly um, participating in the discussion as well, but ultimately she had other stuff going on. So there are people
Yeah.
who
I
are
mean.
in the more progressive camp who want to talk. So like there's a difference between like the people who hold like the social justice like aesthetic, I guess, because they generally are like pro diversity, they're pro representation of like media being important, and they generally hold these views, but are like normal people who are like willing to have a conversation and disagree and believe in free speech and discourse. That's not illegitimate. Like that's a perspective that a lot of people hold. And then there's also people who hold like those same ideas, but they also believe in shutting down all discussion, and they don't even tend to like the pro free speech progressive people or woke people or whatever. They're not woke at that point. They're just like progressive.
Yeah. There's definitely stuff out there that it sort of just goes against them. Goes against the narrative. They could. I think they personally bringing back the discussion of ethics in YouTube in general would be helpful, but I don't think they want to do that either. It's just liberals. Just I think for this current movement, I've seen sentiment not just from the people calling themselves Gamergate 2, but other people who are supportive of them, but they still think a lot of the actors are rather stupid overall. They just want to see the world burn. I'm wondering if that even came from Gamergate, the original Gamergate, how everyone feels like it was misrepresented it. And if maybe yeah, if we had a time machine, go back and they represented it fairly, like yes, there was a lot of harassment, but there was an ethical thing. Do you think we would be seeing this nowadays as badly?
Sorry, that's like a whole alternate history. Like we're changing the past decade. I don't
Yeah,
know what kind of
sorry.
changes this would be. No, but no, it's a good question. I just don't. I honestly, I think things would be a hell of a lot better. And maybe like because like
I think so
Gamergate
too.
was a cultural flashpoint that, but I feel like the culture war shit was going to happen no matter what. Gamergate just happened to be the thing that blew it up so big. And the culture war
Yeah,
stuff. Now, when it
and
comes to like if they now the games press probably be like way more ethical, and maybe like normal people would have like a higher level of trust in like normal journalism, probably as a general matter, if they didn't like know this one major story that still hasn't been corrected for in many publications.
yeah, I mean, sheesh. how they pulled this stuff off in the first place is a little weird. And since we've had a lot of high profile cases, you know, we had the Me Too movement for like women, and Johnny Depp sort of shattered that in the media. Then you had the whole Black Lives Matter pushing with that. And
Well,
then
like
we
to be
had
clear, like there were like with the Me Too stuff, like there's like legitimate cases of people who were
yo, there
legitimately
is
abused, and then there's
legitimate
also
cases.
people who, right?
I'm Harvey Weinstein, horrible, horrible
Mhm.
person that definitely should have been exposed. I think they didn't really go into some of the they didn't take some of the more grooming and minor stuff very serious. You got some people like Kevin Spacey,
Well, he
who
got
else really
fired though,
got
right?
outed?
He lost his show.
Yeah, he lost his show. Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of instances, but it seems like it wasn't taken too seriously. Not a lot more people. They even try to defend other people. I'm just sort of going with the process here. You had the sort of a Me Too movement, and that sort of got set back because I agree, there are legitimate cases where that shit can be applied. Then you had Black Lives Matter, that whole thing, COVID. With that, people are just getting frustrated nowadays, and I think people revisiting. Are you seeing an uptick in people coming to your content or talking about the original GamerGate anymore now?
um, Not. I mean, like there's some. I just hit 2,000 subscribers. Again, I think actually because I think I had 2,000 at one point in the past, but then lost some and then regained them. But I came back from content creation. But so there's some interest in this topic, obviously, but I've not seen like a big jump in numbers recently necessarily. I think I got like 12 new subscribers in the past 28 days. It might no, actually no, it's probably higher now because I just hit 2,000. That was before when I checked, so it's probably like I don't know, like 20 people maybe new this month. And then like I think it was 58 like or something like that the last month. Like so some people did come from like the Sweet Baby Ink stuff, I think. And discover Gamergate there that way because they heard what's Gamergate 2 and they Googled it or they searched for it. Or they saw me on other shows or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this is like an expert on the first Gamergate. I should check out his work." So I got like during that I got like I think like 58 or something there that month, um, but less this month. And there's some interest in it for sure. But with the 10-year anniversary, there's probably going to be more. Plus, I'm like doing a media tour like this, so I'll probably gain some more subscribers that way as well. Raymond Wallman, the documentary filmmaker for the Airplay documentary, he says that that with the Sweet Baby Ink stuff, he did get that was like one of his best months in terms of people buying buying access to part two. He said.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, you figured
10
some
year
of these people
anniversary.
would go.
Hell yeah.
You
Could be even
would
bigger.
figure these people would come back, like with side scrollers. All the people, even Brutus, who was just a complete normie before all this, had to. It was Dev who explained the original GamerGate to him. Okay, they just seem so ill-informed. It would be nice to sort of make
Well,
parallels
I've reached
between
out to
these
side
two.
scrollers and I haven't heard back yet. So
I
other
mean,
people too.
I think history doesn't necessarily repeat them itself. It sort of moves in a spiral. There should be certain lessons to be learned. And you've been a gamer, right? You were friends with gamers, all in the gamer. Okay, Spear. I would assume. Okay, you see it. General attitude of despondency after Gamergate. Did you really feel that within that, or did you draw back from it?
Despondency. Let's define that.
Basically a general defeated attitude. Okay, basically like
Um, some
among your
people.
Gamergate cohorts.
I don't
Yes.
think so. I think a lot of most of these people I think view it as successful. I think there is a certain cohort for sure, who do have this doomer mindset. Um, but also I feel like too, and maybe this is because of Gamergate to some extent. I feel like a lot of the Gamergate people, well, they're very divided. It's a hugely diverse group of people, but I think a lot of them lean a little bit more on the anti-establishment side of things. So like left wing and right wing, they tend to be like a little bit more like skeptical of institutions, let's say, more than your average American probably. But like
Probably.
that's not everybody too. Like there's a lot of people, like a lot of them are voting for Biden, about 30%, 27%. But the outstanding person is was leaning Biden last I heard. So like probably about 30, 30, 40. So I get 30% Trump, 30% Biden, 40% undecided or neutral, or undecided or third party or not voting. But that's also only of American GamerGaters, and that's my sample size is pretty small. Like I said, it's 27 people, and then probably a little bit less. Or actually, it might be about 27 total. But some of those people were not Americans, so it might be a little bit less. Because only about 55% of the people involved with GG were American, according to Chris Ferguson and Glasgow's research.
Okay. Yeah, I there's definitely a couple of people that came out. So, and yeah, Capritas is Brazilian. Okay, but he didn't know about this. There's some interesting stuff with buried deep in the lore. Let me go into. No, maybe I'm trying to think if I should even bring this up. Yeah, why not? Okay. Do you think there's any thought like Tim Pool? Okay, I sort of subscribe to his sort of idea. It's a little bit off with the sort of like the Occupy Wall Street, how progressive politics almost seemed like a good tool to sort of distract from corporate malfeasance. Do you think there's any legitimate part of that that you would agree with, at least in theory, that some of this progressive stuff was pushed, which led to Gamergate that could have come from just trying to deflect from legitimate corporate malfeasance, which I think we've seen it just culture war seems to be a deflection part from I see it distract a lot of people from legitimate microtransactions and more legitimate criticism of big corporations.
Maybe. I
Any
mean, like to some extent, I wouldn't be surprised if like companies, like marketing teams, um, like if they knew the game was going to be trash, they could like purposely gin up culture war stuff by like having their employees come out and say like, oh, well, if you dislike the Ghostbusters movie, you're sexist or whatever, to like distract from like the legitimate criticisms of the film or whatever, right? I'm sure that things like this happen. Um, and like maybe it's a problem, and like maybe we should like criticize it. I don't know, but I would like be very skeptical of like there being like this grand overarching narrative of like, oh my god, the whole all this woke stuff, or the culture war stuff, it's all there to distract from like the real issues. It's the money men behind the scenes. It's the people with the funny hats. It's whatever, right? People have all sorts of conspiracy theories. I don't know if I'd like go. I don't like believe into that stuff. Um, I'm sure companies will use
okay.
it to like their advantage to like try and like distract from criticisms. Like we have seen them do that, I think, with various like films and games that have come out where they're like, oh well, you disagree, you're just like sexist, or they have a problem with women, and or they have a problem with black people, and like maybe in like some cases they do, like in China shrinking the posters which fit on them, but
Yep.
but I think that in the United States of America, people have like a very, and also around the world with the internet, a lot of people have like very divergent views on like what culture should look like. And I think people have very divergent views of like what is moral necessarily, especially globally. And we we have like strong disagreements, and like some of these disagreements are like bullshit disagreements that like don't actually get to the heart of like where the core issues are where people disagree, because people are like arguing about like these really weird fringe cases instead of like trying to like establish what their first principles are, I guess, and then having a discussion based on that. But I think people have like genuine disagreements with one another. Now, is it productive to focus on these social issues instead of economic issues or foreign policy or whatever it happens to be, or scientific research? It's always a mix of things in a society, and it has to be a mix of things. Societies are always changing and evolving. You have to deal with economic questions. You have to deal with scientific questions. You have to deal with foreign policy. You have to deal with social questions in society at all times, and maybe some take priority more than others depending on the time period, depending on the circumstance. But as a society, we're always going to be facing with dealing with these problems and with these questions. So we should find a way to navigate them well, and try to find out what the correct answers are.
Oh, I absolutely agree, but I don't think these a lot of these questions should be sort of answered with games, okay? And that's probably the sort of push that Nita started with the racism, which isn't really backed up by, as you said, Ferguson, someone I'm also a fan of and been following for a while because he has a lot of interest in research that I'm not an academic, so I can't do the validity of that. But there was a Aiden Paladin video recently, although question her. Yeah, that was quite informative on that history of the gamer wars, and she picked a good time to insert that, I think. But it was a good. I hope that generates some interest in Chris Ferguson because he's really underrated person research wise.
Yeah, I agree. Did you
Again,
know that we're trying to set up a debate between him and Jonathan Haidt with me as the moderator.
oh, that would actually be good.
Really?
We're
That
trying
would be
to.
amazing.
Jonathan has not
I
replied yet.
hope that happens. That would
Yeah,
be
Like
amazing.
Chris is down. He's open to it. He's very open to it. On social media specifically, that's what they'd be talking about if we ever get it going.
Yeah, I
I'm
meant
not holding my
I
breath, but let's do it. Let's try.
uh let's
That'd be
get
awesome.
there's one last thing I want to bring up that's sort of related and sort of not. Let's any last questions on the Gamergate book or anything you want to talk about with your book before we
I mean,
last
I'm an open book. So hit me up with anything you got. I think it's important to do this research for a number of different reasons. I think it's important that the truth be known about this. I think it's important that we correct the historical record on this, which I think has been unfortunately inaccurate because much of the early press coverage of this was inaccurate. A lot of the opinion pieces, instead of journalism, we had a lot of opinion pieces, and we didn't have a lot of people looking into the situation and covering it objectively or fairly. I think that was a problem, and I think that a large number of people who were largely innocent, got wrongfully smeared as being misogynistic harassers who got Trump elected, strangely enough. And then
yeah.
there's no evidence for a lot of this stuff. Obviously, some people did get harassed. That's horrible. And anytime you have a large group of people, there's going to be some people who are bad actors, who are sexist or who are trying to make money off the situation. But I think that the vast majority of the people involved weren't this, and that they were smeared as this. And now we have this whole fake history where people looking at this are going to be like, "Oh my God, well, Trump." There's so many articles. Like if you Google Gamergate, one of the first articles on Google is Asia Romano's article, where she claims that Gamergate got Trump elected, and this resulted in January 6th and our election being nearly stolen by President Trump. And when I and like if people believe this fake history and this fake narrative, that's not good for anybody. And it's not good. It's not
Yeah.
good for the activists. It's not good for historians. It's not good for the people who want to make informed decisions in a democratic society to have this fake narrative out there. So I think it's important.
Yeah.
And I've tried to be pretty honest in how I approach the topic. I feel at least maybe you have criticisms for me, but um, yeah, I think it's important work. And if you want to support me, you can check me out on YouTube or Kick or Twitter. Give me a follow, give me a like, give me a subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Comment on Martin's video as well. Um, I'm also working on another project too. I just started.
Yeah, I
Oh
think
yeah.
I tried to
The
catch.
Mud Project.
I think it bored me. Sorry, I was
No.
like,
Okay, we don't have to talk about that if you don't want.
sorry, man. But yeah, different content works for different people. Yeah, I think the last question, which we could turn into something a little bit polarized, and just for a little in bit, weaponization of the academics. That's been my theory for a while. You'll see people in all sorts of entertainment, even Hatman. It's like they keep using this one, not even someone who has their PhD, um, but has been like 8 years been studying this. They keep on citing her, okay, for the Wikipedia for Gamergate harassment campaign. I'm guessing there wasn't much of it going over some of the Hatman stuff. Total Biscuit was arguing about we need to do research for all that. And there is research out there, but what's with the slow move on this research? What's your
What's
thoughts on that
what
before we get
specific
into my
research?
on basically does it cause violence? They sort of downplay that, even especially the sort of progressive side, anti-gamer gates wants to not do the research, and that sort of ties into a couple of other things nowadays. Do you think weaponization of the academics is a legitimate problem, both in Gamergate and in society as a whole? Because I'm seeing that's going on. Because when you get into like global warming stuff, it's not a settled science. I hate that term, settled science. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know about global warming specifically. As for like universities and things like this, I'm not an expert in this area.
Mhm.
I don't know. I know that there are like academics who've written papers about GamerGate that were like wild shit. Like just like not even like not like studies like researching the GamerGate people or anything like that. But like there have been some of those too. But like those don't show it was a harassment campaign or like far
Yeah, the
right or whatever.
FBI sort of
Uh,
looked into it,
but like
and they
there have
could.
been but like the sad puppies and the Gamergate stuff, people have written these like academic papers where it's like opinion pieces. It seems,
Yeah,
and they like to like say that like Gamergate was like this far right like movement. Um,
and people
and that's
will
like
sort of
sad
use
puppies
these
too. They say the
opinion
same thing.
pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but like it's
opinion
yeah.
pieces.
I don't but I don't know how like corrupt quote unquote like academia is. Like when we just read the Lawrence Technological University thing, it didn't look like it was a very like pluralistic approach to the conference originally. But you know, who knows? Maybe with this conversation with Paul soon, that things will be different.
Okay. Yeah,
So I can't really comment too much on that. Sorry.
yeah, I'm going outside of your purview. I see people like with the whole rings of power, the token expert being cited when obviously they go against the ideas of other things, just the weaponization of expertise. Came up in your discussion with Hatman. I thought I would ask you about that particular issue. Gray, any thoughts on that particular thing in there?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's, another tool in your arsenal, so to speak. So yeah, why not weaponize that too? Yeah, I think, anyone's going to look for, well, those who are not necessarily as honest as they could be are going to look for any tool they could use as some sort of cudgel. And I think that one gets used quite a lot. But I don't know if that's unique specifically to this. Like with 2016, we saw that being used. Like if you're calling it weaponized like education or academia, that happened quite a bit. It wasn't just this kind of niche area. But yeah,
I do
interesting
think
theory.
I do think that we probably do need to have like a greater degree of like pluralism, and I don't know if it's like affirmative action or what the fuck for conservatives or libertarians or people with more um, views. But like I do think that when you have like these vast divides in terms of who is in these spaces, I think that that probably is a problem. Like there's always going to be like some degree of like liberal bias, probably in like academia and the arts, but it probably shouldn't be like as big as it is. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how much big it is now, how big it is now, but I believe it's in many of these industries quite large. Um, and that's something that we should probably like look at, especially for like academia, where we probably want to have like people challenging each other's work and trying to find out what's true and what's not.
Yeah, I am thinking we should actually go with the science, go with the facts. People are getting so the liberal left have been on the right. I've been ramping up, been going all crazy for the last 10 years, it feels like. And now
I
we're
think there's a
starting to see a
pushback now.
liberal.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a pushback, but the pushback's coming from the liberal right also. There's a pushback of the liberal right. So liberalism is taking its hits nowadays from what I'm seeing. Okay. But if we go with actual try to get into the science of some of the stuff, which I don't think a liberal people are really interested in, looking at facts, datas, having standards, peer reviews. Everyone wants to throw all this out the door. And it seems like just an attempt to, I mean, it's good to get people's perspective on it, like you're doing for this Gamergate book, but I wouldn't even know how to do it. I think it would help our society, but this goes well beyond Gamergate. So it would be something just to have discussion on. But okay. Any big questions here I have? Got any last questions, Gray, for the man
Yeah, I mean,
writing
I
the
guess it's kind of
Gamergate
just a
book?
throwaway one, but do you think the effect of that, SVU episode, do you think that was heavy on the discourse on this, or do you think it didn't have too much effect?
I know. I'll be honest. I've actually never seen it. I've seen
Really?
Savvy Lizer. She did a video criticizing it. So I've seen like bits and pieces. Plus, I've seen the memes over the years, of course.
I was going to say you have to have seen the
I've seen
memes,
the
like
memes.
they're
Oh,
everywhere.
1000%. So I've seen the memes, and Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like it's not even like internally like it's not good writing. It seems like they wanted to like, from my understanding from the critiques I've seen and stuff. Um, it's like even if they wanted to like create this like uplifting story about like women in the gaming industry like overcoming adversity, but like their whole message at the end is like, oh, you should just quit. So
Yeah.
it's like I don't know. Like seems like it's even narratively doesn't even make sense. But no, I've seen memes. I don't know if it affected the discourse too much. I know people made fun of it, and even like people on both sides, except for Brianna Wu. Brianna Wu uses it in like her congressional ad. She talks about it, um,
Oh.
and like she doesn't like praise it as like the greatest film ever, but show ever. But she does talk about how Law and Order SVU made an episode about my harassment. Um,
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
that's
I might
coming
add
so,
under
that to
but
my
fire.
so like,
resume too.
so she, I guess, has like a more positive view of it, or she did when she made the campaign ad. But I don't know. But like also mainstream people, like how many of these people, these journalists or like opinion writers in the mainstream world who don't know anything about gaming, how many of them saw that and thought, oh wow, that's what it's like. But also, they probably should find a different job if that's how they're deforming their viewpoints.
Yeah, I mean the meme culture seems to be spreading. Okay, maybe you should figure out. I did have one last question about marketing. As you said, you're going through different channels, trying to get the word out about you're writing this book, some of your ideas along with it, and I think that's very admirable. But do you have any other plans? Any way to make a big splash with this? Maybe get Destiny to sign you on.
I mean, if he wants
As
to talk with me, that's totally cool. I would like to talk with him at some point. That'd be nice. Um,
Mhm.
And I just, he's starting his new media company too. So that's something to look at for sure. But I don't know. Again, he probably doesn't even know who I am really.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, maybe a
as for
GamerGate
other,
game. Get a guy to do a GamerGate book game. Okay, AirPlay can be like one level. You jump around. Okay, might be a cute
yeah,
little thing. And but
so
I'd like to go on.
well, no. What do you say? What are you gonna ask?
I
Because
was just
I'm
saying,
gonna answer your question.
marketing. Sorry, marketing beyond sort of just your interview tour.
Yeah.
Any other
So
ways you're expanding?
I'm looking at, well, one thing I'm expanding my stuff through doing the Mud book too. Like I'm making inroads with that community as well. Probably gonna gain like some new subscribers from that. Now it's a relatively niche community. It's relatively small, but I already have like the trust of several people in that community, or some people in that community, and there's like, it'll be an interesting project to explore. I'll get some new growth that way probably to some extent. I'm also gonna be possibly doing like a Kickstarter or something like that, but I don't know yet if I want to do like a full one where I can try and fund myself for a year at least, and do it full time. But that's a lot of money, and I want to set myself up for success. So I was really working on that for a little while, but then I put that on the back burner because I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'd be successful or not. So I've got a lot of
Well,
people who've already agreed.
You realize Kickstarter is almost used as marketing almost sometimes,
Well,
okay? The
sure,
hype
yeah.
around a Kickstarter depends on, and I'm sure the message of get the truth out about the original Gamergate would actually resonate nowadays, especially with the tip things are coming to coalescing in a lot of ways, I think, in that maybe just whore yourself out. Sorry to put in those terms, but you
But yeah,
sort of
that's one
are
thing
going
I've
on all
been.
these.
Yeah, no, I mean, the media tour is one thing. That's not been as successful as I would have liked actually. Like the mainstream people,
Yeah.
they won't really. Or in the games press, they don't. They're deliberately, I think, ignoring the project. I've reached out to some of these places, like
Yeah, I mean, it
Kotaku
doesn't
would be
suit
fine, for instance.
anyone's narrative in reality, okay?
Yeah.
The
Well,
people anti-Gamergate, even pro Gamergate are just washing their hands of it. Like maybe press Sargon on this sort of shit also. Maybe put
well,
his
Sargon and
feet
I
to
might
the
have some
fire.
different Sargon and I might have some disagreements. That'll be spicy. But I already reached out to
Yeah.
Sargon. He wants to talk. I reached out to try and interview him. And he never got back to me. And I reached out to him again to see if he wants to talk about the project now. I'm willing to talk to pretty much anybody. So
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Being a sort of neutral guy and considered a fence and centrist, I'm sure you get that shit all the time also. Do
What,
you?
fence sitting? Oh, fence sitting?
Yeah, you don't take
Um,
a strong stance either way.
no,
You're going with the
actually,
facts.
I mean, that's how like some people perceive me probably for sure. But I don't. I mean, I take like hard views, I guess. Like well, we probably don't want to talk about that right now. But like the Mark Kern situation, for instance, like some people disagree with me on that. I think he's he's made a lot of mistakes so far, and it doesn't seem like he's represented the facts entirely accurately in a number of areas.
Yeah.
And I've spoken out about that. I'm highly independent. If anything, like one of the critiques I get from like the far right people, is that like they don't like me because they think that I'm like a lib cuck SJW. And then like the far left people, they just won't talk to me. By far left, I mean like woke people, like they just won't talk to me.
Yeah.
Really. Or they'll like try and like fuck with me by like sending their followers after me, like Leigh Alexander or something like that. But they're not like having a conversation, generally speaking.
Okay. Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, I
But I
admire
want to
you
do
for having the.
other languages. How do you do? Oh no, I'm perfectly fine with you talking about admiring me.
Okay, yeah, you gotta hype it up. You gotta have an ego in this atmosphere and sort of get some gusto. I would personally press people like Dev to really take this out. Even pressure someone
Well,
like
he does say he wants
Sargon.
to set something up. A dev does. He said he's just scheduling and stuff.
That man's the king of getting attention out. Attention, good and bad. Dev is good at that. Okay.
I want to make it. I want to release this possibly in other languages too. Like one of the main ones I want to
Okay.
get is would be Chinese. But also I would look at like several different languages, like too. Like French would be good. Spanish, Portuguese.
Yeah, Chinese. Isn't that like the most popular language? Not just that's
Well, not
pretty
other than
wide known.
English. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Spanish. Yeah, I guess that would be one route.
Well, I
Go
don't
the
know how they break
multilingual
it down
route.
in terms of like L2 versus L1 speakers and stuff. Because like
Maybe
Spanish
make
obviously
a
has.
manga out of it. Okay. Turn it into a comic book, maybe. Get a Kickstarter for The Truth About Comicsgate, the comic book. Okay.
Well, I thought about
This is a
covering the
hyper
sad puppies story at
exaggeration.
some point, but the sad puppies people, they're not really. They don't like to go on the record as much. So like I don't know how that's
No,
gonna.
it is disappointing. No one knows. And I think personally, a lot of the stuff going on, I personally think a lot of the stuff going on in the novel scene has influenced the sort of culture above it. Because you see all these debates going on in novels, sensitivity reading, all this rigmarole being brought up. And you're just seeing the downstream effect on the rest of media, even for games nowadays. So there is a broader, probably a broader market that probably would have overlap that I think would help you out. But those are just my opinions, and those probably aren't going to do you much good considering
Well, I'm also thinking
some of
about
my
covering
reputation.
Ukraine too. The Ukraine war.
Ukraine. Okay, sheesh. Maybe get Dylan Burns for that. Okay,
Well,
that
I
would
want to
actually be a
interview
good
him, of course.
perspective on.
If I decide to do that, but I also don't want to create too much of a backlog right now since I've already got 2 major projects I'm working on. But
Yeah.
that's one thing to be looking at for
Okay.
sure. And Dylan Burns would be a great person to talk with. Also, Ukrainian Anna. I'm sure I'm going to butcher her last name. So, Anas- Anastasia Paraskova. She's great. I've interviewed her before, actually. We've talked. Uh, and I'd be interviewing a
Okay.
bunch of other people too. I'd be interviewing soldiers, ideally on the ground, um, people who probably got wounded, first responders. I would want to do like an in-depth look to the extent I could, and interview like policymakers too, and people at think tanks, what they think about the war. Russian military bloggers who I probably disagree with on everything and think are hacks. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Or Russian soldiers too, but there's gonna be hard people to get.
Okay. Yeah, that probably would be hard. Chat is throwing around some names. Did you try to get Mundane Matt? I'm
I should
curious.
try to get
Okay, I
Mundane
saw.
Matt, but Mundane Matt doesn't, I guess, like me because I criticized him when I made my
Ah,
video on the saltier than crate situation, where Mundane Matt misrepresented events, it seems,
yeah.
and didn't
Well,
try to get
the
Andrew Dahl's side of the story at all. But
we got a
he
fan.
was invited. He was welcome to come on.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
still talk with him if he wants.
And there's Ethan Routh also.
Well,
I'm seeing
he
names being
agreed to
thrown around.
probably do one most likely, and then he thought it over, and then I did a video just coincidentally it came out around the same time I was talking with him, um, where I talked about how he allowed people to harass me from his his Slack server, and he blocked me immediately after that, even though I got his
God.
official comment on the situation. But I guess he realized it was
Okay.
such a bad look that he decided to block me. Even
Yeah,
though he was
fair
okay
enough.
with it coming out, but I wouldn't care if he was okay or not. It's fucking the truth. So
Yeah, I believe in the truth, no matter if it hurts or not. Okay, go with the truth and have your opinions on it. I mean, facts are just so hard to really determine nowadays. It's really disappointing that people can't agree over basic facts. Oh, last take. Try to get you in trouble with this last one, Kyle Rittenhouse. What do you think about that?
I've not like seen every single thing that the jury put out, but I generally trust juries in the United States of America. From the evidence I have seen, he was not. He was correctly found not guilty of murder.
Okay, that's a fair take. Even Destiny, he sort of got banned from Twitch for it. I had my problems with Destiny, but I respect him in other ways. Got anything to close us out on, Gray, or we just closing down the stream?
No, I think one way or another you asked most of the questions that I wanted to, but just thanks for being willing to come on here and answer a bunch of our questions. I know I'm a bit casual here, but thanks for filling in my giant gaps of actual knowledge in this situation. I found it super informative. So just thanks for being so open on everything.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
sorry
Thank you for having me.
And sorry I couldn't give you a good argument. I felt this is important. Just do straight, and I think we would align on many areas. And what we would disagree on would probably be. I don't like, despite me fighting with people, I don't like to fight. I just have very strong opinions and very fact based, and you're very similar along that. So maybe I'll find an opinion of yours following you at some point where I can pull you aside and argue with it. But until then, I'm just going to close out the stream.
Cool.
And
Well, hey,
everyone take care.
you want to shout yourself out, and I'll shout myself out again too.
Oh, yeah, sure. Double up, okay. Vincent Martin, I just do whatever the hell I want, generally, whatever catches my interest. Like, I don't know if I want to go with, I don't know if I want to pursue, because the Hatman thing got me interested. He seems to have the early stuff, proto Gamergate stuff sort of covered. Might be interesting to cover it, but I'm curious about the sort of after Gamergate, how that sort of connects to the present. Okay, that might be a project worth pursuing, or I might do something with AI because I think AI is getting really interesting now. But I want to do some more. I saw a few things recently. Plus, me, Gray, and artist friend of ours might have a video come out. Who knows when? Okay, on an anime related to AI. Carol on Tuesday, completely underrated anime in my opinion. Probably for good reason. Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Shampoo probably overshadowed. But there's a debate that we're going through it. Don't know when it's going to come out. We're discussing the anime and we're discussing how it relates to AI. And I talk for too long. So, Gray, also plug yourself.
Yeah, go and check out The Thinkers every Thursday on That Darn Kidda's channel. Always a fun time. Bunch of people from at least 3 different continents putting our heads together and thinking about something. Not necessarily answering it, but, come join us. It's fun.
Yeah, maybe you should get on that show, Tachyon Blue. That might be an interesting sort of crossover. Okay, well, maybe you guys can talk over. But this is the end of the stream. Bye-bye.